My name's Paul Hargreaves. I'm a grassland researcher, soil scientist, based down at SRUC's Dairy Research and Innovation Centre in Dumfries. And today I'm just going to be talking a little around the idea of soil quality, and then lead on to some ideas of how this interacts with soil organic matter and build-up and sequestering of soil, which seems to be a good theme to think about at the moment, with the COP conference just wrapping up in Glasgow at the moment. So with soil quality, really this is a concept that first came to light in the 1990s. Its definition really is the function or the capability of the function of the soil to sustain biological productivity, to maintain environmental quality within the soil, and also to promote the health of the plants and animals that are within and rely on that soil. And animals in this case can also include humans as well. And I think this is important when we're thinking about things in agriculture. The concept of soil quality really came out of expanding on how we used to think of how we use soils in agriculture. In the past, it was really adding nutrients to improve yield, and that was the soil was just a function of that. Now with soil quality, we're looking at three different components. We're not playing down the importance of the soil nutrients and the pH and maintaining the correct balance of those, but it's also thinking about soil physics, the structure of the soil, how this helps drainage, and promotes better root growth within the soil, and also equally as important, and there's an area that's come more to the fore now, is the idea of the biology of the soil. For a long time we know, or we're aware that things live and grow within the soil, and there's obvious organisms that we can think about, such as earthworms, that farmers hopefully see on a regular basis within their fields. But with newer technology, especially in the last 5, 10, 15 years, with things like PCR, where we can look at the DNA of the organisms within the soil, then really we can start looking at how these interact together, what kind of functional groups are in the soil, and there's this diversity. How can this help maintain the resilience of the soil quality? And so we start to look at all these things together. And for things such as nutrients, like I said, we still need to make sure that we've got the correct pH in the soil to ensure that the nutrients are being effective. But then this is really reliant on that soil biology as well. The nutrients that you're adding to your soils is being turned over by the biology within the soil and making that available to the plants that are growing there. And so soil structure is also very important with this as well, because that's the area, the gaps within the soil, not just the building blocks of the soil as well, that's where these microbial populations inhabit these areas, and this is where they function, and this is where the efficiency of that functioning is really dependent on getting oxygen to those areas. So if there's more water, if the drainage is poor, if you're getting standing water in your field, then the efficiency of those organisms are really being depleted. So soil structure is important. I would probably say that because that's my area of research, and we've developed methodologies within SRUC to look visually at the soil structure and to assess any damage that's been done to that soil structure. Because we've seen, not only in our own research but other research, that a soil with a good structure, it can only take one pass from one heavy piece of farm machinery to reduce that soil structure by 70 So it's something that can change very quickly, very dramatically, and then you've got to deal with that kind of problem. Down in Dumfries, we concentrate more on grassland fields, and even here you can get problems with compaction. We've purposely induced compaction into a grassland field, either through trampling by animals or by driving across with a tractor. And this was just one event at the end of a season, and we saw after 3 years a reduction of over 10% yield for the trampled swards, and over 14% reduction in yield for the tractor trampling. And it's not just yield that's important that gets affected by changes and damage to the soil structure. It can also have other effects. And again, thinking about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, we also saw from the same experiments that over 3 years, the nitrous oxide emissions, which is a greenhouse gas around 300 times more potent than CO2, nitrous oxide emissions increased in the trampled plots by around 19%, but in the tractor compacted plots by around 45% in comparison to a part of the field that hadn't been compacted. So this is important to think about your soil structure and trying to alleviate that and be aware of any damage that might have happened. Another component of the soil that's becoming more prevalent, and again with climate change, global warming, and the thought about how we sequester carbon, is holding carbon or sequestering carbon within the soil itself. The soils are a global pool for carbon, over 3 times larger than the atmospheric pool and 4.5 times larger than the biotic pool. So the soils are important in this story here. And generally, how the carbon is held within the soil is through organic matter. This is the dead and decaying parts of plants and animals that are working their way through the soils. And it's important that I'm saying working their way through the soils. We're not just burying material in the ground and it's inert and it doesn't do anything. The microbial populations are acting on the organic material as a food source, and so it can release nutrients to the soils to make them available for the crops that are growing within those soils as well and within those fields. So there's benefits for the farmers. Introducing organic material to your soils really should be a win-win for farmers. It's something that we should be really concentrating on. And it's a dynamic activity, this. It's the management of those soils and how you're adding the organic material to soil and how that's being turned over, and there is some release of CO2 to the soils, and we can control that in some ways. The more tillage you do of the soil, then the more CO2 is released. As you open up the soils, as you break them up, as you make the soil and the microbial populations within the soil more available to the oxygen in the atmosphere, this then increases their activity and they turn over that organic matter more quickly than if you haven't tilled your soil. So there is things we can do there. Also adding organic material through crop residues or organic fertilizers or slurry or farmyard manure is also methods of adding organic material to those soils. So it's important we think about this, and if we move from one system to another, we're hoping that we're going to add organic material, not take away organic material, because some of the organic material, it breaks down relatively quickly, like the sugars and starches within crop residues. Others can take years, tens of years, even hundreds of years to break down, and they're just retained within the soil there. Scottish soils are in some ways are blessed by the amount of organic material that they have in them, especially soils on the west coast of Scotland have got high levels of organic material, but in general Scottish soils are between 5 and 10% organic matter. So really we've got to think about how we can maintain that organic matter within the soil. In some cases we may be struggling to add any more organic material to those soils. So maintenance may become the more important focus of managing those soils. But again, it's understanding how we do that. So really, we've got to think about ways of maintaining and improving organic matter within the soils, because they are important for the soil quality itself and the soil functions. And as I said before, there should be a win-win for the farmer of maintaining organic matter within the soil. And really, what we can be thinking about is not leaving soils bare. Thinking about what you do with your tillage, how deep you do that, how much tillage you do. Do you move to no-till or reduced till to try and stop opening up the soils and allowing the organic material to be burnt off, in a sense, by the biological activity within the soils? We can do this through use of cover crops, where we're growing crops between the cash crops to try and retain the nutrients within the soil, but also when that's ploughed back in, it increases the organic material and makes that available, hopefully, for the next crop growing. Also, some of these cover crops fix nitrogen, so they make nitrogen available for the next crop, be it an arable crop or whatever. The other aspects are thinking about hedgerows and tree planting, agroforestry, it being integrated within the arable or potentially the livestock farming systems to try and improve and increase the organic matter that way. Also, different measures of pasture management and trying to think about what residues are going back into the soils there and how we treat those pastures to improve or maintain the organic material there. And globally, we're also trying to think about, and also in Scotland and in the UK, the precision of the nutrients we add in, adding that when it's needed to the crop that needs it, so putting it into where the roots are growing. So this is also important challenges to think about. And finally, the use of organic manures, farmyard manures, slurries, and maybe even thinking about introducing more mixed farming into arable settings to get that organic matter back into the soils that probably need it most. So overall, I'm hoping you feel that soil quality is useful. These are methods that are being promoted on farm now with scorecards to look at this, the limiting factor of that. But in some ways, adding organic matter is really important to fulfill a lot of the components that we need to improve our soil quality.